Welcome back to The Eagle's Nest, the audio retelling of Charlie Supersinski's great book, Soaring with the Eagles, the Copper Peak Story. It's the story of the sport of ski jumping in the western upper peninsula of Michigan and how it resulted in the development of Copper Peak, the world's largest artificial ski scaffold and ski jumping hill. So we find ourselves still back in Ironwood, Michigan, in the last half of the 1920s, 1926 to be specific, and the Norrie Athletic Club has brought back world-class ski jumping competition and notoriety to Ironwood. They did this by rebuilding the new Curry Hill and by sponsoring ski jumpers from Ironwood to compete all over the Midwest and Northwest and promoting the sport of ski jumping by hosting their own local and invitational ski tournaments again. Ironwood is again on the map, with world ski jumping records off the artificial slide at Curry Hill, not just setting the records, but setting the records with hometown jumpers at the hometown slide. Throughout the 1920s, huge crowds of 4,000 plus enjoyed the events at Curry Hill. However, the Norrie Athletic Club, like others in the country, was never flush with money due to the huge expenses in sponsoring meets, the cost of housing and feeding, visiting skiers, paying travel expenses to send skiers to out-of-town venues, and expenses incurred in hill preparation. Ski jumping has always been a club sport and does not depend on tax dollars for its support. It was during the 1920s that the issue of American rules versus the international rules came up and was argued strongly by the Americans that the old rules, which allowed the judges to assign points based on distance more than on so-called form, were better. The international rules, though, were adopted in America a few years earlier with the result of Ironwood ski jumpers like Ted Seberski outdistancing all others in the boys' class but only taking second place. It was the contention of the Ironwood riders that their younger days were aimed at longer distances and it was hard to change their jumping style once it was established. At any rate, it did develop that the Norrie Athletic Club was awarded second place at the Duluth National Tournament in the race for the Odom Trophy, which was emblematic of the club's championship of the National Ski Association. Boy jumpers such as Ted Seberski and Sam Davey continued to do well at all local and regional tournaments. Both Ted Seberski and Sam Davey earned their wings on Curry Hill as youngsters. They would become avid promoters to build Copper Peak. 1927 began with high hopes for a good year for the Ironwood team when Bert Wilczek started out the season with the fourth-place finish held in Chicago at the Forest Reserve Club. A week later, he joined Walter Brotland and John Fieldseth for a competition at the Norge Ski Club facilities in Cary, Illinois. The coming season was marked with high hopes which were dashed with an incredible tragedy. Here's the headline from the January 24, 1927 Ironwood Daily Globe. Ski rider badly burned in firebed, clothing caught on fire. John Fieldseth was near death as a result of an accident in Rhinelander today. Yes, John Fieldseth, veteran ski rider of the Norrie Athletic Club, was so badly burned at the Oneida Hotel in Rhinelander this morning that his condition at noon was grave and it was doubtful if he would recover. Apparently, Fieldseth had been smoking a cigarette in bed. The bedclothing caught on fire. The bellboy found Fieldseth asleep. The fire had not awakened him. Fieldseth, with Walter Brotland and Bert Wilczek, represented Ironwood at the ski tournament in Rhinelander the Saturday and Sunday before, and it was Fieldseth who set a record in the exhibition by leaping 80 feet at the Rhinelander Hill, the best of the day. So the Norrie Athletic Club announced that the tournament for the next Sunday afternoon had been postponed 1 week due to the death of John Fieldseth. The club postponed the event in respect to the memory of one of the premier riders of the club. And in preparation for the local tournament, the local club built a new halfway start on the big slide to more readily accommodate the younger skiers. The new halfway start proved popular with the boys who visit the ski slide, and a number of youngsters are now riding who never ventured on the big scaffold before. The ski jumping tournament attracted not only skiers and skiing fans, but also a very talented poet, Gibbs Johnson. While very little is known about Gibbs, his writing matches the elegance of the sport of ski jumping, which might be defined as poetry on skis. The poem titled Versified Ski Dope for Ya was used as a way of building up interest in the tourney. The Ironwood Daily Globe published the poem in its Friday edition of the Globe. This poem, in its entirety, can be found in Charlie's book. So the local tournament at Curry Hill on February 6, 1927 was punctuated with some especially long leaps. Weather conditions were almost ideal. When Bert Wilczek reefed, he made a mark of 181 feet off the Curry Hill slide and established something for the skiers to shoot for in the remainder of the season. Walter Brotland tried to stretch beyond that point, and while he went 186 feet through the air, he was unable to hold his feet and lost out by falling, a reminder that the hill record set in 1924 by John Stulich was 183 feet. Three brothers were in the tournament together: Leo Anderson, who is 21 years of age, Martin, who was 16, and Benjamin, who was 13. Joe Koski, winner of the boys' class, rode the slide for the first time, and in his first rides, he used a pair of skis that were the property of an Ironwood rider in the tournament held in the old wooden slide at Curry Hill years ago. Walter Brotland won the Curry Hill Class A event. Bert Wilczek was first in Class B. Following the local meet in Ironwood, Bert Wilczek was sent to compete in Red Wing, Minnesota, where he was able to attract some quality skiers to the international tournament in Ironwood later in the month. Similarly, Clarence Burling, Walter Wick, Emil Hill, and Jack Koivisto were sent to compete at Duluth. And when you think about it, this was a good strategy by the Norrie Athletic Club. What better way to invite all the best regional competitors to the tournament than in person, face-to-face, at their tournaments? And this tactic did result in some of the best jumpers in the country coming to the Invitational Tournament on February 25, 1927, including Henry Hall, holder of the world record of 229 feet, Alfred Oberon, formerly of Ironwood and a top-notch competitor, Tom Clark of Duluth, Casper Oyman, considered to be the greatest attraction in ski riding, and a number of talented local jumpers, where the conditions were not, though, the greatest for the Curry Hill meet on that day. The headlines of the next day talked about many spills marking Sunday's tournament. Stiff crosswind and other adverse conditions hamper the ski riders. Alfred Bakken of Chicago, with leaps of 163 and 148 feet, won the Class A event in the 5th annual ski tournament under the auspices of the Norrie Athletic Club Sunday afternoon at the Curry Hill Slide. And Tom Salo of Ironwood, who had jumps of 150 and 161 feet, won the Class B competition. Joe Koski of Ironwood won the boys' class with 163 feet, made by Bert Wilczek, winning the long-standing jump in Class B. And longest standing in the boys' class went to Sam Davey. The old rules were used in judging the event, and a new system of announcing results was a success. The judges of the riding were George Lundeen, Clarence Lindbergh, and Ted Johnson. John Gill was the official scorer, and Ed Hedlund, as announcer, handled the megaphone and kept the crowd informed as to the results of each ride. As in the past, the tournament yesterday was conducted on the old rules but the system of announcing the number of points given on form, as well as the distance jumped by each rider, seemed to work out very successfully. That system had never been tried before. Now here we are at the year 1928. Calvin Coolidge was still president, but declined to run for another term. Perhaps he saw the Great Depression coming. But back at Curry Hill, the number of improvements had been made in time for the 6th season of local competition, and the invitational meet at the new Curry Hill was scheduled for February 26, 1928. In the meantime, neighborhood hills throughout the Gogebic Range served as training grounds for the large hills such as Curry. An example is the Central School Jump, located at the current intersection of Lake Road and Slade Road north of the city in Ironwood Township. The ski jump was located on the bluff to the east of Lake Road and opposite the school. The kids practiced or jumped every day during their lunch hour. This hill, perhaps called Vazanko's Hill now, gave these young jumpers a proficiency in the art of keeping themselves balanced, as they usually only got one jump per lunch hour. And here's the important part about how interested these jumpers were in trying anything to make jumping better. During the time frame of the late 1920s, a great deal of experimentation was taking place to determine the proper shape of the scaffolding in order to make the hill easier to ski. In preparation for the upcoming local meet, the in-run curve at Curry was flattened, eliminating the sharp curve just before the takeoff. With the elimination of much of the danger of riding the slide by raising of the loop near the takeoff, many riders who have not taken part in tournament before are expected to enter the events. Jumping will be just as spectacular as before, if not more so. While many of the older riders have left the city or given up the sport, many young riders whose names are yet unknown to the public are expected to make their first appearance at Curry Hill local tournament. One of the youngest riders to negotiate the big hill is the 10-year-old kid brother of Ted Sebersky named Felix. The youngster who rode the slide just a few days ago may be entered in the tournament. Curry Hill continued to be the scene of record-setting flights. This time in the boys' class, the Ironwood Class A and B riders performed well at home and out of town. With a leap of 160 feet, Walfred Renlund, 17, set a new unofficial world's record in boys' class. As you will recall, one of the difficulties the Norrie Club had to contend with in arranging tournaments was to get riders from other clubs who are not afraid of the big slide on Curry Hill. Since the slide has been improved this year, this difficulty is expected to be minimized, and the slide is now as perfect as it can be made, and even 10-year-old Ironwood boys are riding the hill without difficulty. And it turned out to be a big help in attracting skiers. Some of the best in the Midwest were coming, and by incorporating ski jumping as part of Ironwood's first winter carnival, huge crowds are expected. Some 70 skiers were listed in the program, of which 23 were from outside the area, representing the cities of Chicago, Ishpeming, Duluth, Milwaukee, and Red Wing, Palmer, Iron Mountain, and Superior. 47 local participated. The day after the 1928 Invitational Tournament, the Daily Globe headlines tells the story. World ski record for boys. Walfred Renlund makes a leap of 166 feet. A new world artificial slide record for boys ski riders was set by Walfred Renlund, Ironwood High School senior, with a leap of 166 feet in the annual ski tournament at Curry Hill Sunday afternoon. The tournament was the final sport event of the Winter Carnival and was attended by a crowd of more than 3,000. First place in Class A was won by Elf Bakken of Chicago. Class B was won by Werner Forsberg of Ironwood. George Cudlerick of Duluth won the boys' class. Weather conditions for the tournament were ideal. The crowd was the largest seen at a ski tournament in several years. Bobby O'Neill, boy mayor, and Miss Annabelle Miller, Carnival Queen, and her attendants were honored guests at the tourney. The 1928 ski season ended with the second ski tournament scheduled for the 30-meter Quarry Hill on Sunday, March 4th, 1928. There were 5 classes, old-timers, professionals, boys Class A, boys Class B. The girls' riders 3 girls were expected to compete. No results were available. The riders are listed in the appendix of Charlie's book. Well, we're at that awful year of 1929. The 1929 stock market crash occurred later in the year, so it had little effect on ski jumping for the season. However, as the economy of the Upper Peninsula began its long decline, many of the talented skiers began to look for work in the large metropolitan cities to the south. These skiers began to represent clubs in places like Detroit, Chicago, and Milwaukee. Competition remained keen throughout the Midwest. The Norrie Athletic Club continues its sponsorship of local skiers by paying for their trips and entries in places like Oconomowoc, Racine, and Duluth. The Curry Hill record for their longest jump was tied at Westby near Wausau. The Norrie Athletic Club had their annual local tournament on February 22nd, 1929. It was well attended and fun was had by all. But in 1930, that was the year that Ironwood's supremacy in ski jumping would end when Ulf Engen jumped 187 feet on January 26th of 1930 at Westby, Wisconsin. Ironwood's Curry Hill was the site of the longest jump off an artificial slide for 7 years, 1923 to 1930, but now Westby, Wisconsin, would lay claim to their records. For whatever the reason, the Norrie Athletic Club decided to sponsor only the invitational meet in the 1930 season and forego the local meet. Some 42 riders had registered the meet, of which 30 were from Ironwood. Ted Sebersky won the amateur class, followed by Walfred Renland and Leo Kuklinski, all Ironwood skiers. The top 3 finishers in the boys' class were Arthur Hautala, Benjamin Anderson, and Wayno Kulpe, all Ironwood skiers. And Ironwood skiers continued to do well in competitions throughout the Midwest. 1930 was an infamous year, though, for ski jumping as catastrophe struck Curry Hill again. The June 13th, 1930 Daily Globe headline gave the news. The ski slide wrecked by gale Thursday. A tangled mass of wreckage remains of one of the world's biggest slides. The story went on. A twisted, tangled mass of steel wreckage is all that remains today of the Norrie Athletic Club's 115-foot ski slide on Curry Hill. High gale winds yesterday afternoon snapped some of the steel anchor cables. The scaffold was one of the largest artificial slides in the world, was erected 8 years ago at a cost of $4,000. That's $1922. Whether it will be rebuilt has not been decided by the Norrie Club. This is the second time the ski slide on Curry Hill has been destroyed. The first, a wooden structure, was wrecked in 1914, a year after Ragnar Omvedt set a world record of 169 feet on the hill. Skiing tournaments were revived by the Norrie Club about 10 years ago. With the increase of interest, a new steel slide was built. In 1924, John Stuish set a world record with a leap of 183 feet on the hill. This mark was not broken until last winter, when a new mark was set at Westby, Wisconsin. This was the second time the Curry Hill slide would be leveled in a windstorm, and while this event eliminated the major ski slide on the Gogebic Range, the setback would prove to be temporary, as the young ski jumping community in Ironwood would rebound stronger than ever. So the 1920s ended with the roar of a destructive wind, and you know what? We've run out of time for this episode. So this is your narrator, Dan McManman, saying thank you so much for joining us with this retelling of the great book titled Soaring with the Eagles, the Copper Peak Story. And would you keep Copper Peak in mind when planning your vacation to the Western UP? It's a fun and adventurous visit for the whole family. Oh, and don't forget, Charlie's book is available at the depot in downtown Ironwood, where the Chamber of Commerce and the Historical Society Museum is located, and at the downtown Art Place in Ironwood. These episodes of The Eagle's Nest are broadcast on Copper Peak Radio 102.1 FM at 6:08 a.m. and p.m. and 11:08 a.m. and p.m. Central Time in the USA. We're on YouTube, though, all the time, including previous episodes. Just go to YouTube and use the search terms Copper Peak Eagle's Nest. Scroll to the eagle sitting in the nest on top of the Copper Peak slide, and that's our YouTube channel. And the episodes are numbered. So, thanks again for listening, and see you next time.